Welcome to episode 50 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 13th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself and my interview guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources, so whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Before I introduce this week's guest, I wanted to share something fun that happened this week. A few of my students were featured on a podcast called The Book Club for Kids with host Kitty Felde. I've included a link in the show notes. This episode is one of almost 100 which are available wherever you get your podcasts. Listeners who work with children are encouraged to record them describing their favorite books. I had reached out to the podcast and was sent very simple instructions. I asked my 5th grade teachers to select several students each, and I gave them a very simple template from which the students could read. One day before lunch, I recorded the kids reading aloud. It did take some practice and quite a bit of reassurance, and the end result is a very short and shareable episode. This is just one example of the several types of episodes recorded in this podcast. In addition, there are episodes featuring author interviews, other episodes with renowned guest readers, and every episode features students and their take on current fiction, as well as classics and award winners. It is a resource I've used a great deal. As described in Apple Podcasts, quote, "The place where young readers meet to talk about books. The show includes a celebrity reader and an interview with the author. The host is an award-winning public radio journalist, Kitty Felde. Book Club won the California Library Association Technology Award and the DC Mayor's Award for Excellence in the Humanities. It's also named one of the top 10 podcasts for kids by the Times of London." I had been really forthcoming in my lack of a background in children's literature when I became a school librarian. I am not a voracious reader, and I've been playing catch-up ever since I enrolled in library school almost 20 years ago. And listening to many of these past episodes of Kitty Felde's, I not only have been able to make more informed purchasing decisions, but my reader's advisory is far more detailed and relevant because I have a much better idea of what children this age appreciate when they read books. Listening to the guests on this podcast, all of whom are upper elementary, maybe entry-level middle grade students, really gives me a great perspective into what is, in many cases, going to be a similar response by students of my own regarding the books that they're discussing in those episodes. In addition to the nearly 100 episodes you can choose from, the website itself, which I'll include a link to, is a tremendous resource for school librarians. Under the tab Books We Love, you can search the episodes by book title. And under the tab Writers on Writing, listeners can hear from the authors themselves about their creative process. It did occur to me that these episodes in particular would be great for ELA lessons in the classroom. Finally, this website offers tips for creating lifelong readers, curriculum ideas, as well as corresponding QR codes to all the episodes. Suffice it to say, both the episodes as well as the website are a great resource. I am so excited to share with you this week's interview. Have you ever found yourself having a conversation, even with somebody you don't particularly know very well, and one thing leads to another, leads to another? Well, this is one of those conversations. Tiffany Whitehead comes with a great deal of expertise and experience, and I was able to talk with her about all types of topics, including getting involved in professional organizations, going to conferences, changing libraries, as well as grade levels, as well as the challenges of having a flexible schedule. One of the very nice things about having a podcast dedicated to school librarians is I have the perfect excuse to connect with librarians and to share these great conversations. And now, I'd like to introduce you to Tiffany Whitehead. cannot believe I'm having this conversation with Tiffany Whitehead. We very briefly met this past summer at ISTE 19 in Philadelphia, and I am only now appreciating why you were so incredibly busy whenever I saw you around the school librarian playground. The conference, for that matter, you were always busy, and I had no idea just how busy until I had a better understanding of the role you play with ISTE. So let's start off with that. Could you tell us a little bit about how involved you've been with ISTE over the years?
Yeah, so I went to my first ISTE conference in 2010, and that was I had been a school librarian for a couple of years, and my administrator at the time was like, "Hey, Tiffany, I want to send you to this conference in Denver, and it's called ISTE." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I get on Twitter. I was already active on Twitter, and I'm like, "Oh, tons of people go to this conference. This is going to be awesome." For me professionally, that being my very first big conference was overwhelming, but absolutely amazing. I nearly passed out when I first met Gwyneth Jones and Joyce Valenza face to face. I was freaking out, shaking. I was actually attending the conference with a coworker who had also been my second grade teacher. Perks of small town life. But she was like, "You need to go talk to them, go introduce yourself." And so I did. And from there, that's when I really started getting involved, connecting with them and really them being mentors to me and saying, "Hey, you should have a voice. You should share what you're doing." And I was already blogging at that point. But they really encouraged me to get involved, and I made so many connections at that first conference that I knew that was my place. Those were my people, and I needed to find ways to contribute so that I could play a role and get involved. And so that kind of spiraled out of control from there. I got involved with the ISTE. They were SIG groups at that time. So the SIG or SIGLib, and then we went through several name changes over the years. But I got involved with the leadership in that and met so many great people and grew so much professionally through that experience.
Well, and I noticed that each year you would take on a slightly more ambitious role. And so they don't throw you in, with no experience whatsoever, but you sort of work up to being the president of it's called the Librarians Network now.
Yes.
And so you sort of work your way up to there. And it sounds like for people who are willing to not only demonstrate leadership, but also attend these regularly and make that sort of commitment. Do you realize how lucky you are that your principal sent you to this conference and you didn't have to ask to go?
I do. It was actually a pretty crazy experience. And my administrators at that time went as well. So I went, the technology teacher. I was in an elementary school library at that time. And so we had a little group go from our school. And yeah, that was really an incredible experience. And it got me thinking, hey, I can do this. I can get involved with my professional organizations. I can put into present at conferences. These are things that I want to try. And so from there, I just jumped completely cannonball into the pool and went all in.
Well, I'm curious because at this stage in the game, ISTE 20 is still a long ways off. And yet for people who need to plan for funding and requesting, it isn't. And it's going to be in Anaheim this year. And I was hoping you could maybe give us some insight. This is, if I'm not mistaken, the largest EdTech conference in the world, correct?
Yes. ISTE is huge.
Yeah. It's very international. When I went to Philadelphia, I heard all these languages being spoken and all these groups of individuals representing different countries. It was really just, I didn't expect it to be such a global experience. Could you explain, because we are, our listeners are school librarians, why should school librarians specifically decide to go to something like ISTE? Because obviously technology is a very important part of what we do. But I remember this last conference, many people had to decide between whether or not they were going to go to ALA or to go to ISTE, because the two happened to coincide very close together.
Yes.
Give us a plug for ISTE 20. Why should librarians make that decision to go to Anaheim this summer?
ISTE is the place to be for me. And I've done ALA, I've done ISTE a number of times. But for me as a school librarian, I'm an educator first. And so for me, that opportunity to connect not only with the awesome, huge group of librarians, of school librarians that attend ISTE, but also connecting with other educators, administrators, tech coaches, that's where I get all of my material. That's where I go and learn. And I go to lots of different conferences, but ISTE is really, for me, not just the place where I know that I'm going to be able to go to some really great sessions, but the playgrounds are incredible. But most importantly, it's the chance to connect. And while ALA is a lot of fun and there's tons of authors there and you can totally go be like an author stalker very easily at ALA, for me, the learning and the connections with other educators that happen at ISTE is much richer.
Wonderful.
Of an experience for me.
Can you tell me, how would a school librarian be able to customize their experience going to ISTE? I remember that there were specially coordinated activities that were designed to attract a school librarian audience. And that is where I got to see you. And I'll be honest, I got to meet many of the people I have been lucky to interview on this podcast. So tell me, how does ISTE make this a smaller, more intimate conference for school librarians?
Yeah, so the way that ISTE is structured, they have these PLNs, or these networks, kind of within the larger organization. And so there's a network specifically for school librarians. And it's really one of their larger kind of subgroups within the organization, a really strong presence. And the ISTE Librarians Network pretty much does something at least every day of the conference that is geared towards networking for school librarians. So whether it's kind of the networking fair or some type of social event that they put on, the ISTE playground is absolutely huge. That's like half a day of just tons of school librarians. I know you were there presenting. I was there. So a number of my other school library friends. And then also they do the breakfast with the keynote speaker and the award ceremony. So they have something every day. Even if you're going as a school librarian all by yourself, you can know that you will have those events that you're going to be able to find your people and make those connections. And then also within the regular conference program, there are sessions that are specifically selected by and endorsed by the ISTE Librarians Network. So whenever you're searching and filtering, you can see, oh, these are sessions that are going to be geared specifically towards me. And you can kind of mix those up with other sessions that are kind of geared towards whatever your school's initiative or goal might be for sending you to that conference.
Yeah, I did appreciate the app that I had on my phone, and recommended that anyone who's going to ISTE carry around portable chargers, because you will be using your phone not just to navigate around this city, but also to navigate through your schedule. But the filter that I used the most was the one that would give me specifically oriented towards school librarian sessions. And that did simplify things. It sort of took off some of the pressure that I might be missing something. So I really did appreciate that feature in the app. I will say that I spent quite a bit of time on your blog, and for listeners, I will be putting a link into the show notes, and it's called Mighty Little Librarian. And I'll be honest, I recognize you more because of when I look at the pictures on the blog, and it is what I do notice most about your blog is not only do you believe strongly in supporting your professional organizations, but you've always played a significant role in running the associations. So not just a dues paying member, but also somebody willing to take on responsibilities.
Yes. And so I kind of went backwards because I really got involved with ISTE pretty early in my career. And then from there, the last couple of years, I've been really involved in my state library organization. I was president of LASL, which is the Louisiana Association of School Librarians. And so any way that I can connect with other school librarians and learn and share together with them, that's really what I'm after.
So this may be an obvious answer, but many of us, we're sort of like, look, I pay my dues, I belong, I attend the conferences. What do you say to school librarians about taking that next step when somebody suggests they take on a leadership role?
You get back so much more than you ever could give whenever you get involved with these professional organizations, whether it's at the state level, local level, or national level, international. For me, it's about the people that I'm able to connect with, and the people that are getting involved with their professional organizations are really passionate and they have so much to share. And so for me to be able to work directly with those people on a regular basis, sure, there is a time commitment and, you do have to go above and beyond, and it can get stressful at times whenever you're putting this, work on top of what you're already doing in your everyday job. But for me, the things that I have been able to learn from the other people who are involved in leadership in these professional organizations has been so rewarding for me. And so it's a great way for me to learn. Even though I'm kind of doing some of the work, I'm learning so much more.
Yeah, I found that there's something rather contagious, the energy of being in a room with so many, not only school librarians, but school librarians who want to take an active role in bettering themselves by going to conferences, whether it's at the state level or it's an EdCamp. We'll talk about that. I have to also imagine that your administrators recognize the leadership role and would see that as not just a spotlight on your district, but also, identifies the qualities that they want to see in representatives for their district and their employees. I did find something else very revealing about your blog, and that is how much you like to present to adults. You teach high school students for a living, and yet it's very clear looking at your blog that you have a passion for leading professional development. Again, this is taking on additional responsibilities. What is it that motivates you about teaching professional development to coworkers?
Yeah, so professional development is 100% my jam. That's really one of my favorite things to do, because I can see the impact that I have. When I'm working with a class of students, that's a great feeling, especially when they're really excited about whatever we're doing or whatever we're learning. But I know that when I do professional development, the reach of what I'm able to share goes beyond what I'm personally capable of doing one-on-one with students. So whether it's professional development that I'm giving within my school, which I do pretty often, and I help plan all of our professional development for our faculty, whether it's in service, back to school, or other, just like Wednesday afternoon type things. But also speaking at conferences and sharing with other school librarians too is a great way for me to really expand my reach and my influence, really, and to kind of it makes me push myself because I want to have these ideas that I've tried that have worked out well for me that I'm able to share. And also talk about the things that I've tried that don't go so well. And I think and I've done quite a lot of that lately on my blog. Mm-hmm. But for me, those connections with the other educators, whether it's teachers within my school or librarians all over the country. For me personally, that's one of the most rewarding things that I get to do.
Well, it's wonderful. I did want to ask, but I didn't mention it before, but do you have an opportunity to work with new hires in your district before the school year starts? Because that is something I really feel we should do, sort of be the welcome wagon for any new hires that come to our building, that meeting with the school librarian should be part of that experience of being introduced to not just the building, but the resources and everything your library has for them.
Yeah, so I am one of the people who plans our back to school professional development, and we have a day of in-service for new teachers before the entire faculty comes in. I don't get as much time as I would like, obviously, but I think time is an issue for all of us, but I do get to make that initial connection, and from there I can make further connections one-on-one and work with those teachers that way.
Sure, building those relationships. I do have to ask a purely selfish question. How do you manage to present as many conferences as you do? And the reason why I ask is this year I'm going to present at 2 3-day conferences, and that's like a huge ask. I'm presenting at those conferences, so my district will pick up the cost, but if I were to, say, try to go to another 3-day conference, that would be up to 9 days of missed instruction. I don't know how I would be able to pull that off. I want to know what is your, how do you manage to do that with your administration to approve this opportunity that you go and you do teach?
Yeah, so it was an issue in my previous district. I moved schools. I'm currently in my 4th year at an independent school, a private school. I was in a public school before, and I could usually do, back in my public school days, maybe 2 conferences a year. And they might help pay for one, but I would have to pay a lot on my own. Or if I was speaking at a state conference that was bringing me out to present, they would pay my travel and things like that. But I would actually work comp days over the summer so that I could have days to take during the school year, because they were very strict about your 2 personal days, and it was an issue for sure. My current school, and when I interviewed with them, they were interested in the fact that I present and speak at conferences regularly, and they really support professional development and give me the time off that I need to go and speak. For me, it's hard for me to be out more than 2 or 3 times in a school year. And so I really limit the conferences that I go to, and usually 2 or 3 is about all that I can handle. One, the added workload of working on presentations and all of that, but 2, just being away from school and being away from the kids.
Well, and attending summer conferences, there's something very liberating about that, because you don't have in my case, I have to write sub-lesson plans. Mm-hmm. I know that you can't just walk away from your program either. So no, I see that point, and that's one of the reasons why ISTE is so fantastic, because while you are using up part of your summer, it really is an investment in yourself.
Absolutely.
I would love to ask you about EdCamp, and yes. If that's okay. For us, EdCamp is always on a Saturday. I've sort of gotten into those recently, and I do have a lot of fun attending them. You've been instrumental in organizing the last 5 EdCamp Baton Rouge gatherings, and I go to ones regularly in the Metro Detroit area. I'll be honest, I would like to know how to find more school librarians attending them, because by and large, this is a gathering of gen ed, grade level, and subject level teachers.
Yeah. So I started EdCamp Baton Rouge 5 years ago, like you said. I was involved with the launch of EdCamp New Orleans a number of years back, and I said, it's time to bring it to Baton Rouge. And I went to my administrator at the time and I said, hey, I really want to do this at our school. And he was like, Tiffany, I don't really understand what you are describing. And I said, just trust me, it's going to be great. And so at the time when we did our first EdCamp, I was the only one who had actually ever been to an EdCamp. And so it was definitely an interesting experience. But from there, he actually asked me to start facilitating EdCamp style professional development for our school professional development days. And that's how great of an experience it was. And as far as getting librarians to go, I know they have a couple around the country that are very librarian specific or geared towards librarians. I would love to go to one of those one day. But I just reach out to my local library friends and say, hey, we're doing this. Come on down. And I know that you've interviewed Amanda Jones, and she came to EdCamp Baton Rouge a couple years ago, and she was like, this is awesome. I'm bringing this over to my parish. You know, in Louisiana, we have parishes instead of counties. And so she started her own and has been hugely successful. So, I mean, the great thing about EdCamp, it's kind of like ISTE. As school librarians, yes, we need to connect with each other, but we also need to make sure that we're connecting with other teachers in different content areas, in different grade levels, because that's how we learn. And that's how we make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students and our teachers. So there's definitely value there.
Can I ask, in your state, in Louisiana, can you use time spent at the EdCamps towards your continuing education credits?
Yes.
Because we can too in Michigan.
Yeah. And so we send out a certificate every time that we're finished and get those out to the teachers. We've also had a really great response from our early childhood groups in Baton Rouge, and they actually started one at LSU specifically for early childhood educators. So it's really cool to see how the EdCamp model grows. And after, 5 coming up on 6 years of doing EdCamp in Baton Rouge, kind of seeing the offshoots of that in different geographical areas and different grade level areas as well.
Well, and I don't think you can beat the price,
right?
Especially in an economy where paying for a conference might not be something that I know folks who are still paying off their student loans. So these are the kinds of conferences that you can really get on board with because it doesn't cost anything other than your time and driving to the location. So I really do. I like the format a lot, and I recognize the kind of momentum because you need a certain number of people there to appreciate how the EdCamp format works. We did have a very well-attended EdCamp in one of our community colleges, which was a month before our McCall. So for McCall, in March for us, many of the presenters did their practice run of their presentation they were going to do at the Michigan Association for Computer Users and Learning, the big tech conference we have. But they did sort of a dry run in February at this EdCamp, and it was great because then we could give them feedback about the kinds of things they should change before they present in March. And so it was a good thing. Let's back up because we did sort of jump into ISTE and we didn't really talk about you professionally. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your journey to becoming a school librarian?
Sure. So I actually worked in the public library in high school and in college. I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher, and so I went straight into college, into a teacher education program, and my university there actually let me work on my library certification as an undergrad. So I was the only undergrad in these graduate level classes for the library add-on, which I graduated with my teaching certificate and my library add-on. Back in 2007, I got my first teaching job. I taught 6th and 7th grade English. And then that next year, a library position came open in my district. And I thought, well, as a, 22-year-old, I'll never get this library job. But I interviewed for it, and I got my first library position my second year as an educator in an elementary school library. And I was there for a couple of years. It was a second and third grade school. So we had about 650 second and third graders. And one year we had 3 classes of pre-K, which God bless all of the pre-K teachers out there. Yes. So I spent a couple years in the elementary school, and that was great. And then the librarian at the middle school retired, and I moved on over to that position, which was definitely where my heart was. And I spent about 5 or 6 years at that school, and it was a great experience. I was the solo librarian, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with just over 1,000 students. So a big middle school, but I had a lot of fun there. And then a librarian that I knew at an independent school in Baton Rouge was like, hey, you should come and see. Our library director is leaving, and you would really love it here. And I had no interest in leaving my current school, but when I went and spent a couple of days over there, I was absolutely blown away. And so I'm currently in my 4th year at Episcopal School of Baton Rouge, where I am the director of the library. We are a pre-K 3 through 12th grade school. I work specifically with the 6th through 12th grade students. So we have about a little less than 250 middle school students and just under 400 high school students. And so I'm in a beautiful space. I have a assistant for the first time in my career, which is like mind blowing. And she and I make a really great team and have a lot of fun together. So yeah, that's kind of my journey.
That's fantastic. I've seen pictures of your school.
It's stunning.
It is beautiful. It is absolutely a beautiful space. And I hope that I would expect that anybody in such a beautiful space would be treating it with the type of respect that it deserves. I did want to ask you, I guess I hadn't appreciated, you went from elementary to middle school to high school. And for some people, that type of a transition really does create a certain amount of stress and anxiety to move from what they are comfortable doing to another grade level. Can you tell us, in that summer between moving from elementary to middle, and in that summer between moving from middle school to the high school, how did you prepare yourself mentally? How did you prepare yourself for what you would expect you would need to know going to that next grade level? I know I'm throwing you a question, but it's just, for me, I think a lot of listeners find themselves very concerned about leaving what they know best for something they may not feel nearly as prepared to do.
Yeah, so my transitions were crazy. My first year, when I moved from teaching at the middle school to the elementary library, we were actually, we were a brand new district. So this was our second year as a district, and we were growing so fast that we had to open a new elementary school. So I had to, after I was hired, my principal walked me into the library and said, okay, when you see it, you can't quit.
Wow.
And we spent
That's unforgettable.
Summer, we spent that summer, the one of the other elementary librarians and I splitting the library because we were moving to 2 spaces, but we didn't have the books or the funds to buy new books. So it had previously been, the library had been a K through 5 library. We divided it up amongst ourselves. So that was a crazy transition. And I really didn't have time to think about it. I knew, and I hadn't really worked with students that young very much. And so I spent a lot of time online, just searching for activities and lesson plans. And I did a mean story time. I really loved my time at the elementary school. And I mean, those kids, they just love books and they love reading and they love you and they want to hug you and touch you and be all up in your personal space. That was not necessarily for me, although I loved my time with them. When I transitioned from elementary back up to middle school, I actually did that mid-year. So, why not?
Sure.
And so I was able to kind of onboard the person who was going to be replacing me at the elementary school and spend a little time with the librarian at the middle school who was retiring. So that was a mid-year transition. That was a little bit hectic. When I moved over to the middle school, they were actually in the process of building a new facility right down the road. So I had about a year and a half in that building before we were moving. And so at that time, I did serious heavy weeding, genrefied the collection, got it all ready to pack it up and move to a new facility. And so that's why when I'm saying how many years I was in a place, it's kind of...
It's a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
But then going to the high school, I mean, I got to tell you, I relate to the whole littles in your library. That was last week's episode, because so many people like myself who are high school, I taught high school for 10 years, find themselves teaching elementary age students. And I had a harder time transitioning to the age difference of my students than I did becoming a librarian. Because I had been a high school teacher for 10 years, and I thought, oh, this is fine. I have small children. I can be an elementary librarian. The age difference is what threw me. It wasn't that I was going to be a librarian. That was an easy transition, but the age of the students really threw me. So when you became a high school librarian, what can you say was, for you, the most noticeable difference between being a middle school librarian and moving into a high school setting?
I think moving up to high school has been the most difficult transition for me, for a number of reasons. I'm a middle school person at heart, and so thankfully I still get to work with middle school in my current position. I love that crazy age. It's so fun to see them really grow into themselves. Working with high school students, it was obviously a little weird for me to be working with students who are larger than me, and I get mistaken for a student still on occasion when it's like a jeans day or something. But what I have really enjoyed about the high school is the intense level of research that I get to do with my students. And so although I am not by any means a science expert, I can still be the expert in research when it comes to science. And so getting to work with all of the different students on research projects and everything from using Noodle tools and working on our citations. And I have an amazing database collection at my current school. And so I get to do a lot of instruction with that. And it was definitely a learning curve for me, coming from a public school where I had basically no digital resources and no money for it, to a school where I had to really dive in and learn all of these different tools that were new to me. But it's been fun, and I definitely enjoyed the research aspect of it. But high school is a different crowd for sure. They're tough to please.
Well, and I think there's something to be said, and I've noticed this about librarians in general, is that we are regularly challenging ourselves with new teaching assignments, with new schedules, with new settings. I do not ever want to disparage anyone in a grade level or a subject matter, but I think we can all think about somebody in our building we know who is coasting, who has become somewhat rather complacent in what they do, because nothing has changed for the last 20 years. And I know that for me, our situation is a little different because we are consolidating schools. So our transitions are not necessarily ones we would like to have, like consolidating schools, but we are embracing the changes that come with that. I think I will say something for your personal situation. You are growing and we are shrinking. So appreciate that what you're experiencing is a good problem,
yeah,
and vastly preferred to one that I will do this next summer, and that is close 2 of our libraries.
Oh,
so
terrible.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, since you are at the high school, could you describe your current library program? Insofar, I saw on your blog some of your expectations that you have for your learning space. It sounds like your library is always busy all the time.
It is. It is chaos from 7 a.m. when I get there and there are students waiting for me to open the doors until 5:30 in the evening when my assistant locks things up. So we are the first place open on campus and the last place to close. And we have a lot of students who are involved in after-school activities, so we're kind of that location. Our schedule is pretty crazy. Yeah, we have a number of study halls in the library. The way that our high school schedule is structured, our freshmen and sophomores have a study hall, which we have a couple assigned to us. And then our juniors and seniors have free study. So they check in the office and then they decide where they go. And many of them come to the library. So we have students in all the time. We have a chunk of time after lunch, 30 minutes after lunch each day, called office hours, where students are able to go and meet with their teachers. But as you can imagine, many of them don't. And so they come and hang out in the library. And it's pretty busy and crazy at that time. I'm trying to do some things to kind of focus activities. I've tried to start some book clubs this year, not with great success, but I'm going to persist. And even something crazy like today, I did a jar of candy corn because Halloween is coming up, and having them guess like the math equations that these kids were trying to do to figure out how much candy corn is in this jar. Just crazy thing. That really sums up the craziness of our library. Every day is different. You have to be able to laugh.
Well,
and just keep going.
It sounds like you would benefit because you have such traffic coming through your library that some things like passive programming, things that kids could elect to do if they're there. I'm intrigued by this whole office hours because that's very reminiscent to me of college. And I'll be honest, if we had office hours, it would vastly simplify the experience, especially for the seniors who are all applying to colleges and need to constantly be working with the College Resource Center or the people in your counseling department that are instructional in getting them all of the materials they need for their applications. I have twin boys who are 17, and it has consumed a great deal of the past couple weeks.
I bet it has. Yeah, so we're a college prep school, and so we have a very strong college counseling department, and all of our teachers are churning out those recommendation letters right now. Yeah, the deadlines are right around the corner, so they do make use of that time.
I did want to ask you about some of your expectations because there is, when the students are in the library, it sounds like a lot of it is structured, but it is non-instructional. So that this is a challenge that teachers who are on a flexible schedule have. And I don't have any great answers. I've always been a fixed schedule myself. But when it comes to your expectations of your students in the library, this is not a free-for-all. How do you communicate that with your students?
I haven't figured it out yet.
It's a very honest answer.
I think that this is something that, and I've talked to so many people because this year has really been a struggle for me with the changes that we've had in our schedule. And I don't know what the right answer is. It's very difficult. And what I've expressed to my administrators, for me, having students in the library with really nothing to do, a lot of them, if I am spending 2 hours every day being a disciplinarian and kind of riding around the library on my broom telling them what not to do, then they're not going to come to me whenever they have a research question or they need a book recommendation. And I've worked really hard to try and make the library a welcoming space and to build those relationships with them over the past couple of years. But I'm still in a place right now where this is a challenge. And a lot of times I spend a lot of time saying, don't sit on the table, or don't take that person's phone, or if you need to run around, you need to go outside. I definitely don't have the answer on that. And if anyone listening does have the answer, please, you can tweet me at librarian_Tiff and let me know what to do.
I have seen in the high schools in my district, when students are working in the library, there's a laptop set up and a Google form where they sign in. And yes, there's an accountability piece, there's a supervision piece there, but also I think they indicate what they're working on when they sign in. And I think, sitting around and canoodling with my girlfriend on the couch is not qualify as what are you doing in the library. So I can appreciate that. I think the libraries, and I can say this as an elementary librarian, we as librarians are surprised the extent to which we sometimes feel more like glorified babysitters, and that our role is to be a childminder while the teachers are in other parts of the building. And I hate to say, I don't mean to be blunt, but I know at the elementary level, I am giving my teachers 45 minutes of respite so they can go do their planning. And you are a holding place for students who are otherwise not in class.
Yes.
And so I appreciate your candor, because I think when I speak to my listeners, I'm very honest that I have made more mistakes. And if anybody can learn from them, that would be great. But I also appreciate, yes, let's see if we can get some conversations going, especially when it comes to our upper level librarians who are dealing with these students who perhaps are not motivated to do homework during this time that they're in the library. And you don't want to turn off this willingness to come into your space and be there, because that is also you're serving a purpose, whether it is instructional or not.
Yes. Finding the balances.
Yeah. So I don't think we're done having this conversation, and I think it would be great to hear from some high school librarians who have found ways to keep the time used in the library to be one that is productive and not so much a social hour. It's not a commons. Some people call it a commons, but let's be fair. This is the library. This is not the cafeteria, and I think that's an important distinction. I do want to ask you. You did mention, finding yourself thwarted in some of your initiatives that you've been trying. And I think it's hard when you have those reflections to realize that while you may have great ideas in your head, implementing them doesn't always come out as well as you would hope the first time. Can you speak to the audience, to the listeners, about some of your things that you're working through and hoping to implement in your school?
Yeah. So I don't know why I'm always surprised when I try something new and it doesn't work, and I'm disappointed, because I've been doing this for 13 years now, and this is just how it goes. It's the trend. But persistence is key. And I learned this from EdCamp. We did our first EdCamp, and it was 13 people who I twisted their arm to come to the EdCamp we had 5 years later, where we had 130 people show up. My battle of the books that I do with my middle school, I started at my old school 5 years ago with this vision of having this regional competition and, having our school level competitions and bringing our winning teams to compete with other schools from the area. And it took, again, 5 years from the first idea that I had to grow the program to have become the vision that I initially had for it. And so it's just reminding ourselves that things take time. It takes time to build relationships. I'm year 4 in my current school, and I'm just now starting to feel comfortable and like I really understand the culture and the way that things are done at my school. And so, it takes time. And my plan right now, when I've since realized that we have an issue at our school of our students not seeing themselves as readers. And it's really strange because I know that they're readers. Like I work with really high level, super intelligent kids, and I've worked with them, many of them since they were in 6th grade. And I'm like, why aren't you coming to book club? And they're like, well, I'm not a reader. And I'm like, I'm checking out a book to you right now. Like, who do you think you are? Like, I don't understand, but it's some kind of association that they have with that word. We're very math and science oriented in our school. So I think that for a lot of them, they're not seeing the value there. So my plan in tackling this is to bombard them with programming and do everything that I can to get more books in front of them and talk about books and kind of help them make those connections and those associations with the importance of reading. And I know it's not going to be fast. And I know I'm going to have to work a lot with my high school English teachers on this, but things take time. And I know that even though I'm still shocked when things don't go exactly like I want them to.
But I think that you're right to emphasize the long game. I mean, as much as we would like to make instant changes in our library, even when it comes to our collection, these are things that are investments we have. You can produce immediate results. You throw some money at your collection and you can turn around certain pockets of it. But when it comes to making transformative changes in your library, you are playing the long game and building those relationships. I know for the first time, my 5th graders, I am the only librarian they've ever known. I met them when they were 5. And for me, I have never felt this close to students before because I've never had the opportunity to work with them from when they were 5 until they're 11. And
Isn't that the best?
Yes. And you really do build those relationships. So I appreciate that this isn't something you solve overnight. And as gratifying as it is to create in our libraries these changes, there are some things which just are, by their very nature, going to take time. Tiffany, I cannot thank you enough for the time that you have shared with us. I know our listeners will truly benefit from your perspectives. I know these interviews are, when I say truly the highlight of my day. It really is very sweet and kind that you joined us today. Would you please tell listeners how we can follow you on social media, because you have a great deal to share?
Yes. So you can find me first and foremost on my blog, mightylittlelibrarian.com. I am on Twitter at librarian_Tiff. And I'm on Instagram, Librarian Tiff, but if you're on Instagram following me, you're going to get a little bit of everything. But you can follow my school library Instagram page, which is at Aldrich Knights.
Fantastic. I really do appreciate everything I think we've touched on a lot of different topics. And I have heard from listeners who really feel that this conversation dedicated to what we do as professionals is just refreshing, because we don't oftentimes get to geek out with other librarians. So I want to thank you very much for joining the conversation tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
I don't know why it surprises me that I find so many librarians to be forthcoming and generous with their life experiences, but it really is a wonderful surprise. And Tiffany is no exception. She's been extremely generous in telling us so much about her journey. I do want to use this opportunity to extend an open invitation to anyone who teaches at the high school level who would like to share with our listeners. We could create an episode on teaching a flexible schedule at the high school level. I would really love to hear what you have to say, and I'm sure that our listeners would appreciate any resources you could bring that would make our jobs go that much more smoothly. I do appreciate everyone who listened this week, and I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and your episode suggestions, either on Facebook, Twitter, or our email address, schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include a mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. If you found listening to this podcast helpful today, perhaps consider sharing it with your department and your PLN. You'd be surprised. You might even have to help your coworkers find podcasts on their devices. The topic of our next episode will be Boss Librarian Casey Boyd. I hope you will tune in.